Now we're going to move to today's perspective. And in meeting and falling in love with your partner, assuming you have one, how much do you think algorithms had to do with it? Now you might think, well, nothing. I fell in love emotionally with a human being and some kind of mathematical formula had nothing to do with it. Well, a new book argues that despite all your best efforts, that might not necessarily be 100% true. Professor Anthony Elliott is a sociologist and author of Algorithmic Intimacy, the Digital Revolution in Personal Relationships. He's from the University of South Australia and he joins us now here on set. Thanks very much for talking to us.
Good morning.
Explain it to us a little bit then. I mean, put very, very simply, what have algorithms got to do with intimacy and our personal relationships?
Well, Stuart, we tend to think of artificial intelligence and predictive algorithms as being about organisations and institutions and infrastructures, but it's actually they're increasingly bound up with our identities and our intimacies. This is a book looking at the ways in which women and men today are seeking to cope with and react to the pressures and perils of life in the digital age. And increasingly, what I found through my research is that predictive algorithms are redefining the very contours of what intimate relationships, love, sexuality, and intimacy actually mean in contemporary society. So another way of saying that is that automated machine intelligence is now kind of working within us, steering our personal preferences, even amplifying our erotic impulses.
So how does it go that far? I mean, we're all used to hearing about, for example, just a very simple example, when you're on Facebook, you are automatically put in touch with certain people because of algorithms, and those people, I suppose, might finish up becoming your partner. But there's a bit more to it than that?
There is certainly much more than that to it. I mean, of course, part of the problem with algorithms is we don't actually clap eyes on them. It's a bit like God or globalization. It's an invisible force. And I think one of the things that's happening today, it's as if the power of predictive algorithms are being downloaded into the minds of individuals. Relationships are more and more recast as just kind of personal informatics. And whilst there are many benefits or potential benefits here, there's also a huge amount of risks because, whether it's Alexa or Siri and the various, chatbot GPT, but the range of quantified sex lives and AI-powered dating apps today, all of this is recasting people really in terms of, on the one hand, their desirability or their undesirability, their seductiveness or being unwanted.
I mean, I can understand how it affects here in your brain. That sort of makes sense.
Yes.
How does it affect here in your heart? How does it make that leap, if you like?
Well, a good example, you mentioned friendship. I mean, in the age of machine learning algorithms, people are increasingly now turning to artificial substitutes for companionship. And a good example of that is the chatbot Replica. And the name really tells it all. The advertising bump for Replica is always available, always with you. So this is kind of 24/7 companionship, permanent availability. And what flesh and blood friend could actually compete with that? But the rub is, in terms of how it goes beyond your mind and potentially into your heart, is that as you train Replica's being trained on data, and it's your data. So this is kind of all about, me, and me in a kind of lifting of narcissism to a sublime stature.
Does it really matter? I mean, computers and algorithms have influence on so many different things to do with our lives. Does it matter if it's also having, an effect on our relationships?
I think the short answer to that is we don't know. We actually don't know. So this is a radical social experiment happening now in real time in 2023. People are trying this stuff on and they're trying it out. And obviously this is a sea change from how our parents met or how their parents met. And we're in a world now in the United States that's estimated that something close to 50% of couples are now meeting online. So, in terms of, say, friendship tech, so how many chatbot friends can you have? Should you have one? Should you have 3, 6? What's the right number? Also, if you do go down that particular pathway, how does that then impact on your day-to-day friendships? How do you integrate the relationship between digital intimacy on the one hand and face-to-face encounters on the other?
And presumably out there are all sorts of people sitting around trying to come up with these algorithms as well, and putting them into place so that people like you and I and everyone out there watching are affected by them.
Yeah, so, in terms of, say, relationship tech, it's become a culture of swiping right and swiping left, but the actual metric that goes into these algorithms, that's not visible. We, as a user, as a consumer of these products, you kind of can't see that. So it gives rise again to lots of risks and potential dangers and dilemmas.
And just explain a little bit more, how do these algorithms actually work? What do they do?
Well, it's a bit like a recipe, so you follow a recipe to bake a cake, and essentially predictive algorithms are the development and the design of a recipe for a particular service, whether that's making a friend or going on a date, or whether it's Netflix or watching TV or Spotify for listening to music. And more of us are now, as it were, handing over aspects of our agency to automation. But again, my conclusion in the book is that we're running a risk here of turning ourselves into predictive systems.
And that does sound like something we should be worried about.
Well, it takes the spontaneity and the edge out of much of this, and it also gives rise that the more you hand over and give up agency, obviously down the track, the more problematic that is in terms of making personal decisions about what you want to do in your own life, because it becomes much easier to just put it on autopilot.
Good to have it explained to us. Thank you very much for coming in and doing that. Anthony Elliott from the University of South Australia, sociologist and author of Algorithmic Intimacy. The book is called The Digital Revolution in Personal Relationships. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.